Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing great. So today after a long period of time, I have come up with another topic or a section which has been debated and which has involved a lot of ambiguities in the recent times. The reason is that this section can encompass a lot of transactions which we cannot think about, and also the provisions are very broad. So I'm talking about the section 194R, which is a machinery provision, which is a TDS provision on a benefit or a perquisite to be provided to a resident. So without wasting further time, let's directly get into the topic. So I hope everyone is able to see my screen. So yes, we are talking about section 194R, which is TDS on a benefit or a perquisite. Now let's look at the basic provisions first. Now this provision is applicable from 1st July 2022, and let's look at what it says. So it says that any person who provides any benefit or a perquisite, whether convertible into money or not. So the benefit or perquisite can be or cannot be convertible into money or not, and it is provided to a resident. This is an important point to note, that any person who provides any benefit or perquisite to a resident, and this benefit or perquisite that is provided is from the exercise of business or profession by such resident. So the resident in the course of carrying out his business or profession receives such benefit or perquisite. Then in such a case, the person who is providing the benefit shall, before providing such benefit, has to deduct tax at the rate of 10% of the value of benefit or perquisite. So whatever is the value of the benefit or perquisite, 10% of such value is to be deducted by the person before providing such benefit or perquisite to the resident. So to give you an example, imagine there is a wholesaler and there are various retailers to which such wholesaler provides goods. Now, imagine that the retailer, on account of purchasing a certain quantity of goods, the wholesaler decided that he will give some incentive to such retailers. Now, these incentives that the wholesaler has provided, he's provided, say, free tickets to an IPL match. So in such a case, the benefit that he is providing is the IPL tickets, free IPL tickets. Now, before providing such tickets, he has to make sure that 10% of the value of the tickets is to be deducted as TDS based on the provisions of 194R, because the retailers are getting this benefit of perquisite from the course of exercising the business or profession. So this is one of the examples. There are various other transactions that can come into it. We'll discuss them in the further video. So let's look at what else the provision says. The provision says if the benefit is wholly in kind, or partly in kind and partly in cash, and the cash portion is insufficient to deduct tax. So suppose there is so if the benefit that you're providing is wholly in kind, suppose you're providing a car or you're providing, say, free tickets, which I already mentioned. So in such a case, how do you deduct tax? So the section says that the person who is providing the benefit should, before providing the benefit, ensure. So the person who is providing the benefit should ensure that TDS to be deducted is paid by the resident. So before providing the benefit, the provider of benefit has to ensure that the recipient has already paid the required TDS on it, and only then he can provide such benefit. Okay, so this is a case where the benefit or perquisite is wholly in kind. Also, it can be a case where the benefit is partly in kind and partly in cash, and the cash portion is insufficient to deduct tax. Suppose, say, the value of the benefit that you're providing is, say, 100 rupees, and the cash portion in it, say, is 5 rupees, but the TDS that you're required to deduct is 10 rupees, and accordingly you are unable to deduct tax because the cash portion is insufficient. Accordingly, you have to ensure that the 10 rupees of TDS is first paid by the recipient, and then you may provide such benefit. So some may ask, how should you ensure that the recipient has paid the TDS? So a circular has been brought out by the CBDT, wherein it says that the recipient has to pay such TDS in the form of advance tax, and the challan of the advance tax has to be given to the service provider, and the service provider has to insert that challan number in his TDS return. So in this way, the benefit provider can ensure that the recipient has paid the required TDS. Now, let's look at cases where Section 194R is not applicable. So, Section 194R will not be applicable if the value of the benefit to be provided to a person does not exceed INR 20,000. Okay, so if the value of the benefit is less than or equal to 20, Section 194R doesn't apply. So it also doesn't apply to an individual or HUF, and the individual or of HUF whose turnover from business does not exceed 1 crore or gross receipts does not exceed 50 lakhs. So this is a similar condition that is there in 194C and 194G as well. So if an individual HUF who is in the course of business does not have turnover exceeding 1 crore, or in the course of profession does not the turnover or the gross receipts does not exceed 50 lakhs in the preceding financial year, then TDS shall not apply. So these were the basic provisions, but if you can see, the provisions are very broad. So the benefit of perquisite can mean anything, and the resident can receive such benefit of perquisite in the course of business or profession in various forms. So there were ambiguities that were created, and accordingly in this section it is mentioned that the CBDT shall, for the purpose of removing difficulties, bring out circulars to clarify certain positions. So CBDT has issued guidelines. CBDT has issued two circulars, Circular 12 and Circular 18 of 2022. So these are very important guidelines that are there, and we'll look into these guidelines and understand what all can the section cover. So the first query that was raised in the circular is that is it required to check if the benefit of perquisite is taxable for the recipient under section 28(4) of the Act? Now section 28(4) of the Act is a PGBP provision wherein it mentions that any benefit or perquisite that you receive in the course of business or profession is taxable. Now here, so the service provider, here the question arises is that whether the service provider, if I am providing some benefit, do I have to check if it is taxable for the recipient or not? The answer that the circular says is no. You don't have to check whether it is taxable for the other person or not. If you are providing a benefit or perquisite, you have to deduct tax. So unlike a charging section, this is a machinery provision. TDS is a machinery provision, and it is not a charging section. So accordingly, you don't have to check whether if it is taxable for the other person or not, and you have to go ahead and deduct tax. The next query is it necessary that the benefit of perquisite must be in kind for section 194R to operate? So if you can see here, where it mentions that if the benefit is wholly in kind or partly in kind, that means the benefit, here the section mentions benefit in wholly in kind or partly in kind and partly in cash. Nowhere it mentions if the benefit can be in cash, but if you see the intent of the provision, it is very clear that the benefit can also be in cash. So accordingly, it is not necessary that the benefit has to be in kind. It can be wholly in cash as well. Okay, let's look at the next one. So the next query was, is tax to be deducted if the benefit of perquisite is in the form of capital asset? Okay, so suppose you are providing some capital asset as a benefit or perquisite to the person who is receiving such benefit. Suppose you are providing say a land, you're gifting a land. Now this thing is a capital asset that you're giving, is in the form of a capital asset, and this may not be taxable for the recipient. So is tax still to be required to be deducted? So as I've already mentioned, that you need not have to check whether if it is taxable for the other person or not. If you have provided a benefit of perquisite, you have to deduct tax. Doesn't matter if it's in the form of a capital asset or not. So let's look at an example. I'll just explain you with an example. So here it mentions that principal loan waived by a bank under one-time settlement scheme would constitute income falling under section 28(4) relating to the value of benefit or perquisite arising from business or profession. Suppose say a business organization has taken a loan and is unable to pay the loan, and the bank has allowed a one-time waiver of a one-time set by way of a one-time settlement. So it says you don't have to pay it. So this is an income for the business organization, yet is it in the form of a capital asset. Yet is it the form of a capital benefit that you have received. And accordingly TDS has to be deducted under section 194R. But if you see, the bank in this case is facing a hardship, wherein first of all it has to deduct tax. Second thing is it has to bear the haircut, that is the waiver that it has allowed to the recipient, that also it has to bear. So accordingly, the circular has clarified that this waiver of loan under a one-time settlement would not be applicable to TDS under section 194R in case the lender, I mean the person who is providing the loan or granting the waiver, is a public financial institution, cooperative bank, scheduled bank, state financial corporations, deposit taking NBFCs, etc. There are others as well. So this is also another clarification that was provided. Now let's look at an important one. This is an important one. It mentions whether sales discount, cash discount, and rebates are benefit or perquisites. Okay, so sales discount. Now, generally, this is a practice in all businesses where definitely sales discount, cash discounts, rebates are provided during the normal course of business. Now, imagine if you are providing discount to many of your customers and you have to deduct tax each time you provide a sales discount or a cash discount. So it will be very difficult, and hence to remove such difficulties, the circular has removed the applicability of 194R on such discounts and cash discounts. Also, sometimes what happens is you may provide some items free of cost. Suppose say for a purchase of say certain amount of items, you provide say 2 items or 1 item free. So even in such cases 194R doesn't apply. But if you see this, if some free samples are provided and other incentive schemes are provided. Okay, so what can such free samples? If you're providing some free samples for testing or for their use to see if they can order some more else. But such free samples, if you're providing, TDS under 194R applies, and there is no exception or an exemption that is provided. So let's look at what can such examples be. This is an indicative list, not an exhaustive one. Suppose if you're giving free samples, as I already mentioned. Also in case of incentives such as car, TV, computers, gold coin, example mobile phone provided. So usually what happens is these big wholesalers, they provide certain benefits in the form of car, TV, computers to retailers who have purchased in bulk quantities. Also in case of royalty agreements, if there is a sale of a larger amount, or if you have made a sale exceeding a certain limit that is fixed by the provider of such benefit, then they offer car, TV, computers, or various other benefits to such persons. So all these incentives shall also be covered under section 194R. Next, if you're also sponsoring trip for recipients and the relatives upon achieving certain targets, okay. So if you have achieved certain purchase targets or any other targets, and if the service provider is sponsoring trip for your relatives or for you, so in such case, these are also benefits or perquisites where TDS is applicable. Also free event tickets if you provide free medical samples to medical practitioners, etc. Now, imagine a situation where there are two organizations. One is the seller, another is the purchaser. So if the purchaser company purchases some quantities and if the seller company has provided some benefits to the organization. Now how has it provided? It has provided, suppose say free insurance to the employees of the seller company. So in such cases, the benefit and perquisite is enjoyed by the maybe by the owner, director, or employees of the recipient entity. But even in such cases, TDS is to be done in the name of the recipient entity. Okay, and the threshold that I mentioned of 20,000 is to be seen in respect of the recipient entity and not the employees or the directors who have actually utilized the benefit or perquisite, because they would have utilized the benefit not in the capacity of exercising a business or profession. They would have exercised in their individual capacity. But the TDS, since it is done in the name of the recipient entity, the threshold also has to be seen in the respect of recipient entity. And here, TDS doesn't apply to a government entity, such as a government hospital, who is not carrying business or profession. So TDS is not applicable to them. Okay, next let's look at the another point, which is valuation. Okay, so what will be the value of benefit or perquisite that you provide? That was also one query that was asked. So the circular mentions that the value of the benefit or perquisite should be based on the fair market value, except in the following cases. So in cases where the goods are purchased by the benefit provider, suppose the benefit provider has purchased goods and these goods are given as benefit or perquisite to the recipient. In such cases, the value of the benefit or perquisite shall be the purchase price by the benefit provider, the price at which it has purchased. Second thing, if the goods are manufactured by the benefit provider, in such cases, the selling price that it charges to its other customers. So the selling price that it charges to its other customers will be the value of the benefit or perquisite. Next point, applicability on products given to social media influencers. So in some cases, there are certain social media influencers who advertise the products of certain companies. So what they do is they take the product of the company and on their social media posts or in their videos, they advertise such products. Now is TDS under 194 are applicable to these social media influencers? So the circular says that TDS will not be applicable if the product is returned back to the manufacturing company after rendering the service. So after the advertisement or the information of the product is given, and if the product is returned to the manufacturing company by the social media influencer, TDS will not apply. But if the product is retained by such social media influencer, then TDS will be applicable. Next important point is, this is also an important point, which says that reimbursement of out-of-pocket expenses incurred by the service provider in the course of rendering of services. Suppose there is a person, suppose there is um, a training expert who comes to an organization to train employees. So he has to travel from, so says he has to travel from one city to another, and he has to incur certain expenses such as travel, boarding, lodging. So in the other city. So in this case, suppose say the liability was of the service provider. That means the expert who is coming, he only had to bear such travel, boarding, lodging expenses because these are expenses that he's incurring in the course of his business and profession. So he has to incur such. This is his liability. And if such expenses are reimbursed by the recipient, that is the organization, if the organization reimburses such expenses to the service provider, then this will be a benefit or perquisite provided by the organization to the expert. But there are also nuances to this, wherein suppose imagine if the invoice that was raised for such boarding, lodging, etc. was obtained in the name of service provider itself, then there is no doubt because it was the liability of the service provider. The invoice also is in his name, and since the expenses are reimbursed by the organization, this is a benefit of perquisite and TDS under 194R applies. But if the invoice is obtained in the name of the organization, then in such case, TDS under 194R will not apply. Also, there can be a situation where the liability is of the service recipient only, not of the service provider. That means not of the expert. It is of the service recipient. That means if suppose in the agreement it was mentioned that the expenses such as travel, boarding, lodging shall be incurred by the organization. And in such cases, the service provider has incurred those expenses as a pure agent, and the service recipient reimburses such expenses. Then in such case, TDS will not apply because it was the liability of the service recipient only. So reimbursement in such case will not attract TDS provisions under section 194R. Okay, this is also an interesting point where there is a dealer conference to educate dealers about the products of the company. So there are usually conferences held wherein the dealers are made aware about the products of the company, how to obtain the orders, what are the sales techniques that they can use, what are the issues that are facing, how can queries be solved for each dealers. So all these conferences are held. Now these conferences are held free of cost, and a question arises that whether such conference is held and whether benefits provided by way of such information or training that is provided is a benefit of Perquisite. So the circular says that such benefit or perquisite or such conferences will not be a benefit of perquisite, and TDS shall not apply because it is provided to all dealers, right? All dealers come. This is in the course of business, and this is provided to all dealers. So TDS will not apply. But if you're providing some specific benefits to particular dealers only, then in that case TDS will apply. Also, the circular mentioned that it is not necessary that you invite all dealers. Just because we said that you should not provide incentives to specific dealers, it is not necessary. That means you have to invite all dealers to the conference. Okay. Also, TDS shall apply if expense is attributable to a leisure trip or leisure component. Okay, so as a part of business conference, you are providing a leisure trip or a vacation off or an off site to such dealers, then such benefits provided will be a benefit of perquisite on which TDS has to apply. Also, if you are incurring expenditure on the family members who are attending the business conference or dealer conference, if you are also sponsoring their tickets of their family members, then that is the benefit of perquisite. And suppose there is a conference held on a particular day, and the dealers arrive well way before the conference held, or they overstay even after the conference is held, then and any expenses that are borne by the company for such overstay or pre-stay, then such expenses will be a benefit of perquisite on which TDS has to apply. But obviously, one day before, if you come one day before and if you overstay after one day, that will not be treated as a benefit of perquisite. Also, there was a query that was raised wherein it mentions that what if I'm not able to allocate a particular benefit to a particular person because the benefit was provided as a group. If a benefit is provided to a group as a whole, you're not able to identify the benefit allocated to a particular person. Then how do you deduct TDS? So circular says what you can do is there's one option. What you can do is you can decide not to claim the expenditure. You have to suo motu disallow such expenditure in your income tax return, and then you don't have to deduct TDS. So this is one option that is given to remove difficulties. And then TDS on reimbursements done under section 194C or 194C. So there was a circular which mentions from the CBDT earlier, which was issued way back in 1995, if I'm not wrong, which mentions that TDS also has to be deducted on reimbursements. So in cases under section 194C and 194J, if you have deducted TDS on reimbursements, then obviously TDS under 194R will not apply for such transactions because you've already deducted TDS under other sections. Okay. Also, the question arises: TDS applicable on issue of bonus or right shares? Okay. So let's take both situations separately. Bonus shares. So if a company is issuing bonus shares, I mean, if it's a listed company is issuing bonus shares, then in such cases there is actually no benefit that is arising to the shareholder because the value of his shares overall remains the same even after the bonus shares are issued. So TDS, there's no benefit perquisite, TDS will not apply. Also, it has been clarified that for right shares also TDS will not apply under this section. So other points that we can speak about is, here I mentioned that it is applicable from 1st July 2022, but make sure that even though it is applied from 1st July 2022, this limit of 20,000 has to be checked for the entire year, right? So limit has to be checked for from 1st April 2022 to March 2023. Okay, so the limit, for purpose of calculating the limit, you have to consider this period. But for the purpose of deducting tax, it will be applicable to only those benefits or perquisites provided from July 2020. So this was the provision of 194R and the circulars that have come up by the CBDT clarifying certain positions and certain transactions that may be covered. So I hope you got an idea as to what are all covered here, and you found this helpful. So this was a short video that I intend to put up. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be coming up with another videos. Let me know if you have any suggestions. Put it in the comment box, and I shall address to it. So thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.